Good morning. In our journey through Leviticus, we look at chapters 17 and 18 today. And again, I mean, many of these chapters begin with the words, the Lord spoke to Moses, and this one does as well. In chapter 18, again, we'll start that way, the Lord spoke to Moses. But in chapter 17, God talks about sacrifices, and that all sacrifices must be done in the temple by the priest. Because if if somebody just does a sacrifice out somewhere in the land, like they were used to doing, I mean, often some of the sacrifices would be to idols, to false gods. And God said, if you sacrifice a goat somewhere out in the wherever, out in the field, or at one of the previous altars even that you have used, that won't be considered a sacrifice, and you will be not worshiping me. You will not be faithful to me. And if someone does that, I mean, anyone who sacrifices anything, an animal, a bird, a dove, whichever it might be, any place other than bringing it to the temple, is then to be excluded from the community. I mean, it seems pretty harsh, but in a way it's protecting the people's interest in so many ways. I mean, to worship God and God alone is the idea here. No more worshiping false gods, and not having someone who is maybe worshiping an idol, then sharing that and leading someone else astray. I mean, and this is one of the things that I think about in the world anyway, is that how many things in the world are leading people away from God? How many things are we worshiping other than God? How many examples are we lifting up other than God? And if we could as a people, as everyone in the world, if everybody could put God first, everything else would fall into place. But number one, not everybody knows God. Not everybody has any respect for God, or any thinking that God is God. I mean, he's just some being out there, maybe something that someone dreamed up, But anyway, I mean, it's these rules, these laws that God is giving to keep the sacrifices within the temple, is to keep the ceremony and the sacrificial offering in its proper honoring of God, and in its proper perspective of asking God for the forgiveness, of showing God the remorse, and all of those things. And it kind of goes on, quite a bit here, just kind of repeating a little bit, but it's, and then again, it's, it tells the priest shall dash the blood against the altar, and all of those things that way. And it's, it's, God specifically says to the people of the house of Israel and to the alien that resides among them. So, and I mean, in my mind, an alien is someone from outer space, but an alien is a foreigner, someone who is not an Israelite. I mean, it could be a Samaritan, it could be an Egyptian, it could be a Roman. I mean, these aliens that lived among the people, even though God said, I will drive the people out and it will be your land, we got to remember that at this point in time, the Israelites are still early in their journey of wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. So they aren't totally separated from all of the other people. And there are traders. I mean, you think about the camel caravans, and I mean, people going and trading and bringing different goods around. I mean, it was a continual influx and outflux. I mean, just like it is today with people moving around because of the distribution of goods. But God is saying that anyone of the house of Israel or any alien among you, I mean, if you worship in some other way, that person is to be put out of society. The person is to be not welcomed, and to protect the integrity of worship, and to remind the people that, number one, they are God's people. And then verse 10 of chapter 17, if any one of the house of Israel or the aliens who reside among them eats blood, I will set my face against them. And he says the blood is the life of the being. And you know as well as I do that, there are people that, they get hurt in an accident, and they bleed out and they die, because the blood is what brings the life. The blood flowing through the arteries and the veins is what carries the oxygen and the nutrients to every part of the body. And without the blood flowing, there is no life. So God says that we are not to eat the blood. And we need to remember that there's a difference between blood and the juices that come out of the meat. See, God says it's 100% fine to slaughter the animals, to eat them. Be it, they couldn't do pigs because, there were certain things they couldn't eat, but, for a sheep or a cow or a chicken or a turtle dove, all of these different things it was 100% legal to slaughter them for food, but not to eat any of the blood. The blood was to be taken out and put back into the earth. And it reminds me of ashes to ashes, dust to dust, or as we do often, during Lent, we'll, make the sign of the cross on someone on Ash Wednesday, and you are dust, and to dust you shall return. The lifeblood, God says, is to go back into the earth, to be put into the earth and to be buried, because it is from the earth that all things come. The earth is what, the ground in the earth is what nourishes all living beings, whether it be plants or animals. We all derive and get our nutrients in one way or the other from the earth. So God says very specifically, not to eat any blood that way. And in verse 14, for the life of every creature, its blood is its life. Therefore I've said, you are not to eat any of the blood. Chapter 18 gets back into talking more about sexual relationships. And again, this starts with the Lord spoke to Moses saying, and then the first thing he says is, I am the Lord your God. Reminding them, I am the Lord your God. I have the authority to give you these commands. I'm watching out for you. I'm providing for you. I am the Lord your God. And then he says, you shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt and other places, but he says, you must follow my statutes. And then he talks about sexual relationships. He says, you shall not approach anyone near of kin. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother or her, and it talks about our sexual relationships in so many ways with mother, father, sister, brother, and I remember growing up, cousins, this near blood relatives, you were not to do that. This was forbidden, it was not to look at. And it comes down to so many of those things here, and it says, you shall not, like your father's sister, your aunt, or your uncle, depending on, and especially, not, I guess I don't remember that it says anything specifically in here about man and woman, but God's intent is always for a man and a woman to come together and to be one, and to have that sanctity of marriage, to set themselves apart from all other, and to remain true and honorable that way. And so it's very, he goes into, a lot of specifics in our sexual relationships with other people. And then he goes into later on, you shall not have sexual relationships with any animal. And I can't imagine even thinking about that, but I know that it happens. I've read things about it. It's just kind of, what are they thinking about, But it should just make sense that we don't do things like that. But God has said that, in verse 23 of chapter 18 in Leviticus, you shall not have any sexual relationships with any animal and defile yourselves with it, nor shall any woman give herself to an animal. And so, it's just so much common sense in so many ways to me, but not everybody has common sense, and common sense seems to be getting even to be less prevalent in today's society. The saying is common sense isn't so common anymore. But, so in chapter 18, rather, God talks about our sexual relationships with people that we shouldn't be, or with people that we shouldn't be even thinking about having sexual relationships with. And it's always that reminder: do not defile yourselves in any of these manners. And don't sin against yourself and that person and me. God says. He says we got to remember that God says, "I am holy, therefore you are holy." And I was thinking that I had read that in chapter 18 again, but I didn't see it again when I was looking through it just a few minutes ago. But the reminder at the end of chapter 18, again, the last words in chapter 18, I am the Lord your God. Just like he began chapter 18, I am the Lord your God. And then it's kind of therefore, this is how your sex life should be. This is the sexual relationships you should have. And, sex and sexual relationships are some of the more difficult things that we find to talk about in society today. And so much of, sex is so perverted in society today in so many ways that we're getting kind of almost numb to some of what God says and to pay attention to. So we'll continue tomorrow reading through Leviticus as we journey through the Old Testament this year in our daily readings. Thanks for tuning in today, and as always, may God richly bless you.